Hello there everyone, you have tuned in UXWBill, and yet again I find myself with the house all to myself, which means that I can leverage not only use of the kitchen but also the kitchen table for my nefarious video making purposes. I don't know why so many folks in the viewing audience have such an affinity for videos shot on my kitchen table unless it's just that homemade look and feel. But the truth of the matter is, I really don't care. I'm happy to make videos for you no matter where they might be set, in any of the usual settings that I use at least. Today, folks, I present for your viewing pleasure a Dell computer. This is an Easy Bake capacitor oven model. Okay, no, not really. This is actually an Optiplex GX270, pretty late model for these clamshell style cases. And I'm going to tell you that right out of the gate, I've never been a fan of the styling of these particular systems. I always thought that the Optiplex of this era, especially compared to the Dimension series, was just unbelievably ugly. And a lot of my issue with the design starts with this light-colored plastic piece here. I always thought this looked like a goofy, smiling thing. They did it a lot better on the Dimension. Well, let's go ahead and take a look at this system, which is actually something that my dad found at someone's moving away sale. And we'll see just what we happen to get here. I can tell you right away that the odds of this being a real computer are not very good at the start, because the floppy drive, if there ever was one, seems to have gone missing for some reason. I don't know, maybe it slid off into the case, maybe there was some sort of a blanking plate that went here and has since disappeared or been the victim of some kind of an accident. I don't know, but it's possible, because these two identifying stickers on the front of the case indicating that this is a Pentium 4 micro-style space heater, as well as having been designed for use with Windows XP space heating software. Well, the latter is definitely kind of loose. We have another sticker here that outlines the specifications of the machine. As you can see right away, this is an absolute rocket of a computer with a hyper-threaded Pentium 4 at 2.6 gigahertz, throwing things right out into the lead there. 512 megabytes of RAM, 40 gig hard drive, and they indicate that there's a CD-ROM drive, no operating system. They call it a small form factor computer, which is correct. And then they grade this thing cosmetically as grade A. Well, at first I was inclined to disagree, but given how I usually see these machines in exceptionally poor repair, with severe scuffing, scratching, and major breakage of the case, well, maybe they're not so terribly wrong in their categorization. This one is in surprisingly good shape for its age. The only real case of vandalism that I can see, other than the usual scuffing and scratching, it looks to me almost like someone outlined the letters in the Dell brand with an ink pen, which is a common vandalism method for board school students everywhere. So I'm guessing this computer might have seen use by kids, or maybe in an academic school environment of some kind. Looking around here on the back, we find a little bit more vandalism. Looks like there's some sort of waxy substance that is partially obscuring the serial port. We do have some hope of this being a real computer, because it actually does have not only a serial port, a parallel port, but also PS2 keyboard and mouse ports. You get a bevy of USB ports. There's 6 on the back, and 2 more on the front. Audio input-output connections, probably gigabit Ethernet. Would have been nice if the corresponding Dimension series machine of the time would have gotten gigabit Ethernet. But oh well, I guess you can't have everything. And rather amazingly, Dell did try to include everything in this small form factor case. These machines, I kid you not, although it is perhaps more of a suggestion than anything else, not only do they have expansion slots, but they also have an AGP graphics card slot. Who in their right mind would put an AGP graphics card in one of these things? I don't know, because that sounds like it's just asking for something to go bang. Because as previously stated, thermally advantaged design is not one of these systems' strong points. No, indeed it is not. Despite the thermally disadvantaged nature of this system's chassis design, the case is at least able to be disassembled without tools, with one very notable exception. If your particular Dell Optiplex GX270 has this foot on it, which is an accessory I've never seen before, you will need at least one tool to go ahead and back off this screw that attaches the foot to the system. There was another option for these systems that facilitated their attachment to the back of a display panel, most probably a model supplied by Dell and purchased ideally at the same time you would have bought the computer, at least ideally from the sense of Dell's fiscal performance. Fortunately, you don't need very much in the way of tools. You probably already have everything you need in your pocket, and if by some chance you don't, well, you could probably bum one off of somebody else. As soon as you've removed that, the system can be taken apart without the use of any other tools, unless of course you need to do something along the lines of removing the power supply or possibly even the motherboard. In order to open the system, you need to set it on its side. Hopefully I set it on the proper side so that I won't attempt to open the case upside down or do something similarly stupid here on video. I'm not sure I'll actually be able to open this case on camera, but you know what? I'm going to give it the old college try, even though I'm a high school graduate at best. So, we'll go ahead and push the button on this side and lift it up just a little bit, and then we'll push the button over on this side and lift it up just a little bit. I don't think I can do this. I think the other side just latched on me. Well, you know what? Well, there's a William, there's a way. I'll go over here to the toolbox and get a little bit of a helper out. I may not need it. I probably could have sat here and fiddled with it enough on video to get it to open, but you know what? I'm not above cheating. They say winners never cheat and cheaters never win. However, eagles may soar, but weasels, the animal, not Weasel 2HTM, do not get sucked into jet engines. So what we'll do here is we'll go ahead and we'll just insert a disassembly aid on this side of the computer so it can't click shut. And it looks like I probably could have done this without going and getting the knife, but oh well, you know the old Boy Scout motto, be prepared. Let's just see how many capacitors have fallen victim to this machine's oven-like effects, and also whatever kind of hardware might be in here for our perusal. You can see a motherboard, probably very similar to the Dell Dimension series of the time, with the exception, of course, of the built-in gigabit Ethernet that this system got, and the Dimension, of course, did not. There's the AGP slot. Interestingly, it looks like this is nothing more than a second display add-in card, an add-to card, I'm sorry. That's the correct term for that particular item. I know those existed for PCI Express. This is the first time I've ever seen one in an AGP system. But what this would serve to do is to break out the second display connection that's supported by the Intel, probably 875p chipset in this machine. And it would give you the ability to attach a DVI display or even possibly operate two displays at once, because you know that's possible with high-performance graphics solutions like the Intel Extreme graphics that this system undoubtedly has. Of course, if those graphics aren't enough for you, and you're really feeling brave or foolish, you could install an AGP graphics card in here. Also a PCI slot right next door for conventional expansion cards, and amazingly enough, almost all of this system's electrolytic capacitors look to be in very good shape. Either this is a very low hours system, which is certainly probable. I mean, look at who the hard drive manufacturer is. Those Diamond Crash series drives did not tend to last too long. At least I've never seen one that did. But here we have two capacitors that have started to lose the plot. You can see that they have started to eject their electrolyte through the stamped holes in the top. So eventually this motherboard is going to require a recapping. Now that we've taken a look at that, let's see what our power supply is capable of. 160 watts worth of blistering power. I would tell you that is probably with an extraordinarily healthy following wind. This particular power supply sees use in a couple of other small form factor Dell machines, particularly also the Dimension 4600 and the later small form factor Optiplexes as well. There is no floppy drive cable here, so I'm guessing that yes indeed, there is simply a blanking plate that has fallen out of the system over time, and there never was a floppy drive in this machine. Take a look at this very interesting lash-up for the CD-ROM drive. This is a parallel ATA drive, I think. Yes, it's hooked up to a parallel ATA channel with this special sort of Mylar ribbon film cable that everyone loves so much because they're so easy to tear. Attached to this thoroughly well-constructed No irony whatsoever here, folks. Daughter card, adapter or interposer, such as it may be. This leads to the drive getting power, the data connection, and rather remarkably, especially for a system of this time, an actual dedicated audio output. So clearly this system's CD-ROM drive is capable of directly decoding compact disc digital audio and feeding it right into the integrated sound system on the motherboard. Now folks, I have to tell you, even though I'm a huge nerd and probably the only person in the world, or one of a very few people in the world who actually cares about such a thing, well, I'm very surprised to see that there, because in my Dell Dimension 8300, Dell had already switched to delivering CD audio over the system's data bus, and that's all that modern CD-ROM drives support, which is kind of disappointing, really. But it works now. It didn't used to work very well. I can remember the earliest systems that featured that, and it really was kind of questionable, especially given that the bus really didn't have enough bandwidth to relay CD audio and hard drive traffic and everything else that had to go over it. It tended to result in stuttery, skipping playback, and it also resulted in the drive being spun up to its full speed because it was doing data extraction from the audio disk rather than decoding it directly and staying at a nice, quiet, single-speed playback. Again, something that only a nerd like myself would probably ever care about, but it's definitely nice to see it in this system. And of course, there's the aforementioned Maxtor. This one's actually badged as a Fireball 3, but it's constructed very similar to the later Diamond Crash series, and I really don't have any use for these drives. Maxtor hard drives as a whole have been pretty terrible to me. These have been by far and away some of the worst. In fact, if you can remember back to my hard drive platter shooter video, one of these drives was used as the base for that particular platform. It does appear that someone has added a memory module. Definitely not a bad idea. So let's go ahead and fold this shut, and we'll see about having a smoke test. Now, there are some people in the viewing audience that take issue with my talking about computer power supplies exploding in long disused computers or computers of unknown provenance. They're like, does that really happen that regularly? Or you're full of crap. That doesn't happen very often at all. Well, folks, I have to tell you, in the interest of full disclosure, these systems and myself, they have a bit of a history. Not the Optiplex, but a client of mine's Dell Dimension 4600C, which is almost this identical system, has blown up twice when I've plugged it in. Not good, and not very confidence-inspiring. So that's the first thing we're going to do, folks. I've got a power cord right here. I'm not going to plug any peripherals into this system that I care about. The two times that it happened on the 4600C in question, which is resting downstairs in my computer parts mess, it was the standby section of the power supply that blew up, and it was conductive glue that had been white and compliant originally, had turned dark brown and conductive, shorting together things that were never intended to be shorted together, and that was what caused the blow up in that case. I'll go ahead and check the voltage selector. It's set to 115, so we should be good there. And then, well, there's nothing else that I can do. I can't stall anymore. It's time to live vicariously, thanks to the advantages of time delay fuses. Okay, well, it powered up momentarily and nothing exploded. So my confidence is restored, at least so far. Did sound like there was a fan that was a bit rumbly in there. But I'll go ahead and get the rest of my input peripherals hooked up. I'd swear this thing is producing a very obnoxious whine. I can just barely hear it. I don't think it's the CFLs. Well, that power supply may be going to have a problem, but hopefully it won't have it while I've got things I care about plugged into this computer. Although actually that's only the optical mouse and the screen. The keyboard's one of these rubber dome mush boards. Has some unevenly yellowed keys, and I really don't care too much about it. And we'll go ahead and get the... Yeah, there we go. I say I care about the screen, and I just tried to break it by tipping it over. Of course, you unwind cables, and they're so neat until you look away. And then they start conspiring against you. This is just good times, folks. Very good times. My apologies for the incredibly dizzy camera work. Hopefully I haven't given anybody vertigo or anything yet. Although with the production standards these videos are held to, anything is certainly possible. So we'll go ahead, plug this in as well. I have to unplug this charger. Alright. Now we'll try and turn this around so it looks a bit more presentable, and probably find that I've expertly looped some cable around something that shortens it to by an unacceptable degree. But let's just go ahead and see what this system does. Beep. Previous attempts at booting this system have failed at checkpoint H-disk. Oh, that's got to be a good sign. Looks like the CMOS battery has failed. I'm sure that Diamond Crash hard drive is very, very good. Boy, it sure is hanging around a long time at performing automatic IDE configuration. I'll bet the hard drive in this system is shot. Nothing would surprise me. I am assuming it's cabled up properly. Might not be. Yeah, I'm starting to smell something kind of hot. That may not be the best sign ever. I don't plan on keeping this system, to be honest. But don't even ask, because I'm not going to sell it on YouTube. I don't know. But I'm thinking that the hard drive is probably launched. So this system's not likely to do anything terribly interesting. But let me check into it a little bit here. And I'll be back in a, well, not a flash, because this is a video camera and it doesn't have one of those, but I'll be back in a video light. How's that sound? I don't think it's good news as concerns the hard drive. It doesn't make any abnormal noises, but the system could not get through its automatic IDE configuration with this cable plugged in, leading to the primary IDE channel's master device. I will check the jumpers on the drive, but I can't imagine anybody's been fooling with them. Anyway, with the drive disconnected, this is what we get. So the system's CMOS battery has certainly quit, or is very, very weak. And it's got a setup password. Isn't that just lovely? See, this computer, I think, has been a victim of vandals and such like. It'll probably let me look at the values, but they're all disabled as indicated by this light blue type. So I can't actually change anything. So it looks like if I want to do anything about this, I'll have to find the password clear jumper on the motherboard, throw it, and hopefully that'll do what I need to have done. So again, I'll be back in a brief period of time. This power supply fan, it's spinning, but it doesn't move any appreciable amount of air to speak of. There's barely a breeze here, and there's nothing coming out of the back of the power supply. So that probably accounts for some of the longevity that I've noticed from the power supplies in these particular systems. Can you tell I think that these were a horrible design decision? I like Dell's products, don't get me wrong. But I don't think these were their shining hour. None of these small form factor systems with a Pentium 4 processor. And they're just bad news. My dad gave $2 for this at the moving sale, and I'm here to tell you that I think that was probably about $10 too much. If there's the off chance that anyone in the viewing audience is wondering where the password clear, disable, or removal switch is on a Dell Optiplex GX270 small form factor system, well, it's right here next to the system's ATX power connector and low pin count I/O controller. It's this green jumper right here. When it's in its normal position, it's covering both pins. To clear the password, you simply remove the jumper from one of the pins, then you turn the system power on, and Bob's your uncle, or in my case, late grandfather. And for those of you wondering about that saying, yes, I know that UXWBill here on YouTube uses it. However, their channel is not one I follow. That is a very common expression, and yes, Bob really was my late grandfather. He lived to be 101 years old. He had a pretty good run. I'd like to live that long myself, so long as I've got enough of my faculties intact to actually enjoy my existence at that point. Will I get there? I don't know. I could certainly stand to lose a few dozen pounds, but Then again, he smoked for many years of his life because that's what everybody did from approximately the 1940s through the 1980s, until one day he had a cancerous thing coming in on his lip, and his doctor told him to quit smoking, and as the story goes, he quit smoking that very day, never touched another cigarette again. Is it true? I couldn't tell you, but he certainly had enough determination that I could believe it. Wow, what a digression there. I've made some interesting discoveries in exploring the motherboard and this system's design a little bit further. See this little fella down here next to the floppy drive power connector off to the left? That is what you think it is. That is the adaptation harness for a serial ATA power connector. And at first I got to thinking, well, I wonder why that's in here. There doesn't appear to be any serial ATA port on the system, but there is. It's just totally not in a form factor or design that I would expect to see, or that I have in fact ever seen before. But there it is, the lone single serial ATA connector. The presence of that in the power wiring harness made me think that perhaps the system's power supply had been replaced. And I'm not going to tell you that it hasn't, because if we look down here, there is a hole in the body of the case, and it appears that it mates up with a tapped and threaded matching hole in the power supply's case. So I'm thinking this power supply may very well not be original to this system. I've gone ahead and changed the jumpering on the hard drive. It was set to cable select, which is of course what it should normally be set to. But in case there was a logic failure or something, well, we'll just go ahead and see if it makes any difference. But I expect the hard drive is cooked, well done. Probably completely dead. But we'll just power it up again, and for grits and shins, we'll see what happens here, if it'll actually let me into setup. That hard drive could be holding down the bus, keep the system from doing anything. And I don't think it's good news, because the Dell BIOS doesn't usually indicate those kind of faults stopping the boot process unless they're pretty serious, and they've occurred multiple times. Looks to be a Northwood Pentium 4 in this system, which is probably the only prudent choice. I would imagine that Prescott's are supported, but I cannot see that being a good idea. So let's go ahead and see. We'll turn the primary master drive back to auto here. Somehow it's come back to having a 3.5-inch floppy, even though I just cleared that. Well, we'll set it again. Alright. Save changes and exit. I don't expect this to be terribly productive. We'll see. Okay, it got through its power on self-test, so either it had amnesia and it lost all of its settings, or we have a hard drive, 40 gigabytes in size. Go figure. Probably a logic failure on the drive's board, that's all I can figure. Go ahead and change the password jumper back to its normal state here, so that the system won't complain about that. This requires more of a twiddle fingers than I actually happen to be, and it's bent. And I just broke the little tab off the jumper. Maybe again, this is not the first go-around this system has had with a password being present. I really don't know, but there's a lot of things about this system that are just very, very strange. Okay, Windows did not start normally the last time it booted, so that hard drive may not be out of the woods just yet. Let's see what it does. Booting into Windows XP. It's a blue bar. Somebody told me the color of that bar actually changes depending on home or professional, and it just restarted itself, which is not a good sign. You know, I really hate that automatic restart on system failure thing. So what do you want to bet? Bad hard drive, infestation with malware, inappropriate drivers loaded, kids playing around on the computer, could be anything. We'll see what the nature of the failure is if it happens again. This system did complain about its memory while I was puttering around with it, so I ended up reseating it. Oh yeah! We have a 7E series stop error in KDCOM DLL. Not familiar with that DLL. Don't know if that's a part of Microsoft's distributed COM system or what that might be. But we'll see if the system might have it in itself to boot in safe mode, if nothing else. I can't believe I'm sitting here investing this much time in a truly worthless system such as this. We'll see if it'll manage to boot in safe mode or not. Ooh, the hard drive just spun down, spun up again. That is not a good sign. And there's our reboot. I think that hard drive is cooked well done. We'll try this again one more time. Oh yeah, that's a bad sign. That's a real bad sign. There's no point in doing this. I'm just doing it to be silly at this point. Should probably just go ahead and turn the poor thing off. I don't have any of my diagnosis tools up here with me, so I can't really tell what exactly is wrong with this system. It could be bad memory, since it came up complaining about that once. I reseated the modules, and it had video corruption too, so I'm sure they weren't making proper contact. But this hard drive, to me, knowing my experience with Maxtor drives in general, and almost everybody else's experience in the world too, they're just not very good. I mean, we could try pulling out the memory modules and just see if it makes any difference. This is what Saturday nights here have come down to. This is not what normal people do on their Saturday nights. The amount of system memory has changed. Well, aren't you just an overachiever? How much system memory is actually in this thing? Okay, it had 768 megabytes. Now we're down to 512. So that probably wasn't too terrible. But we'll go ahead and try safe mode again. Just because I'm a glutton for punishment and an eternal optimist. I'm not sure which is worse, actually. It amazes me how much time I can sit here and fritter away playing around with these computers. And sure enough, there it restarted. So yeah, we're done. Just not any good at all. Guess I'll go see what that hard drive does in another machine, but I think it's probably toasted. Here's as close to an epilogue as you're going to find in this particular video. I went ahead and moved the hard drive into another machine. You can see that it has got some problems according to its smart data, but nothing show-stoppingly disastrous, at least not yet. There's one reallocated sector. It's run for about 40,500 hours, been turned on and off 2,195 times. And the drive isn't running terribly hot, but here in the basement it shouldn't be. We have a few more troublesome aspects down here. There's been one reallocation over time, one current pending sector, 5 sectors that were found to be uncorrectable during the drive's offline smart scanning activities, and it's been making use of the error correction code and exceeding its capability. So that's not the best sign in the world. This drive is probably pooched, knowing that it's a Maxtor drive. Any other drive I'd probably give the benefit of the doubt, but not this one. That's just not a good sign. Well, the song that's playing certainly ought to say it all. I did a quick, excuse me, SpinRite run on this hard drive. Sure enough, found a bad spot. Did not manage to totally recover from it. And that was that. Now, I've got the hard drive installed in a different system. This is an Optiplex 170L. It's in much better shape. It's also the mini tower version. I don't know that there was ever a small form factor version of this one. But I hope that the hardware might be close enough for this particular stupid trick to work. I should probably go ahead and unplug the network cable, because if that hard drive is full of malware, I'd rather not have it breaking out onto my network. Let's just see what happens here. As for the nature of the crash, it turns out that the DLL in question that was being cited is actually a portion of the Windows kernel debugging infrastructure. Now, I know there are some debugging utilities included with Windows NT family products, but I wouldn't have expected there to be kernel debugging facilities included. Uh-oh. Yep, that was a reboot, so evidently whatever's on that hard drive is still pretty screwed up. I know, I ought to leave this alone, but I think I'm like mentally incapable of doing so. I should just park this whole thing, wipe the drive, and move on, but for some reason I just can't seem to do that. Guess what, folks? Other than the fact you already know I couldn't leave it alone, I got it to boot. Much to my absolute amazement, I went ahead and gave it just one more try, while still hooked up to this Optiplex 170L series system. And when I chose the disable automatic restart on system failure notification, it actually came up and booted, and now it's finding all the hardware that's part of this system. I would think that the two have the same chipset. They're probably both 865 or 875 series systems. This is an 865, okay. So there probably is a little bit of difference. The other Optiplex probably had an 875 series chipset. And okay, it didn't crash. Wow, I'll bet there's some malware going on here. This looks absolutely legitimate, doesn't it? Constant Guard Protection Suite. My apologies if it is actually legitimate, but... And of course we have the usual security bonuses here. Microsoft Security Essentials might be out of date, and no firewall is turned on. But the first thing we're going to do, let's just go ahead and plane things out here. If you use an actual planer to do your computer repairs, that's probably not a good sign. Get rid of the wallpaper. Found some hardware for an Ethernet controller. When do you suppose this system was last used? Now we can only really take a guess here. Quit it. I wanted to spend my Saturday night installing hardware on a Windows installation I didn't care about. Don't you think I'm capable of doing that by myself, Windows? But here we go. Here's the answer. It looks like this computer was last used in 2012. Probably 10:04 a.m. or very close to. Interesting. Quit that. Interesting that the created date is prior to the last updated date. Of course, I don't know how those things are counted in Security Essentials. I've never really paid all that much attention to it. But since we have what should be appropriate graphics drivers loaded, isn't that interesting? Claims it's in 8-bit color mode, but you know it can't be because we have high color and true color icons back here. Of course, it's probably just running a generic frame buffer driver at this particular instance, since it didn't come up knowing what the video adapter was. I'm really kind of surprised it came up at all. Oh well, that's enough fiddling around with this. I do need to go ahead and wipe this hard drive. It's the right thing to do, and I should just go ahead and get it done already instead of wasting time doing stupid things with a derelict Microsoft Windows XP installation. So at long last, folks, thank you so much for watching. And I will certainly catch you all later. Please do feel free to leave a comment if you have one. Guess what, folks? You get a little bit of a bonus. I'm airing a little bit of dirty laundry here, folks. I love it when non-technical people try to do things to their computer that they don't quite understand how to do. Take a look at the contents of this Run dialog box. Yes, I am absolutely certain that will have the intended effect of actually opening a command prompt.